Fenton! 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 Oh, Jesus Christ!
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show where I rave and rant about board games, but usually more the latter. This is a very cutesy episode because I'm here to talk about Dog Park. Cutesy, lovable Dog Park. I mean, look at that dude. Look at that good boy. What are you gonna do?
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity.
What can I say? I like dogs. Well, I like animals in general. I'm probably more of a cat person. Certainly I think if I would have a pet, it would probably be a cat. But honestly, animals in general I just really like, so dogs, cats, whichever, pick one. I'm totally happy. I'm not a kids person, totally down for animals. But Dog Park is a very light, sort of, very cutesy game about literally walking your dogs. You acquire dogs with different special abilities, you walk them in the park, get resources, and with those resources you acquire more dogs and seek to achieve points by various objectives and awards. There's a few different mechanics in here, and the idea with this is that this came out and didn't get a ton of buzz as far as I'm aware. Like, people know of it, but I didn't see it take off quite as much as I expected, especially with a theme like this. However, the designers, Lottie and Jack Hazel, actually own a dog, and this was the inspiration for them making a game like this. And you would have noticed recently I did another game by them called Forever Home, which was a little pattern building game, which again was themed around homing dogs. So not all of their games are all going to be about dogs, but certainly these first couple have definitely been on that market. One of the comments I tend to hear is that this one is generally thought of as too light. Like, too light for most gamers, too light for people to get too much out of it. Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with light games, and let's face it, if you can have stuff like Camelot on the market, pretty sure there's room for a game about walking your dog. So my question is this game too light to get much enjoyment out of it, or is there more to this than people realise? That's for me to find out.
I think not, baby puppy.
So in Dog Park, you are trying to earn the most reputation points by walking your dogs through the park, gaining resources and acquiring more dogs as time goes on, with different card abilities that could combo off each other. The game is kind of a mixture of multiple mechanics though. You have the board here with various like point scoring opportunities for the end of the game for having the most dogs in a particular breed. But essentially the game is kind of like three major parts. First part, you got to bid for dogs. So you've got all these dogs with different card abilities, and this deck is probably sort of reminiscent of what's in the base game. I have mixed it with the expansion, so you know, this is kind of about what you would get. But the idea is that first you will do 2 rounds of bidding on these dogs. So you have a few of them out in the field down below on this track here, and players have a dial where they can bid their own reputation points, effectively victory points, to acquire the specific dog they want. Now, if anybody else wants to go after the same dog, then they're essentially in a kind of blind bid war to see who will bid the most points in order to get the dog. Once you've got the dog, you then have to select who you're actually going to send out for a walk. So everybody has their own little extra board with a lead on it. They call it the lead board. And with the dogs that are in their kennel, or basically their storage area, you'll decide 1 to 3 dogs that you want to walk. So I might decide, well, let's walk this Cane Corso Italiano, a Border Collie, and a Gordon Setter. I have no idea about dog breeds. I can barely recognize most dog breeds on site. So if anything, I'm learning something by playing this game. But the idea is that when you play these dogs to actually walk them, you have to pay their cost. Each of them has a resource cost on the side, and you have to pay these in resources, which are tighter than you might think for a light game, actually, in order to actually walk them. Now, these dogs come in different breeds for these awards at the end, as I said, but they also have different abilities. Some want you to walk them as often as possible. Some like you to get lots of the same breed of dog. Some like you to diversify. Some give you abilities when you select them for walking. Some get you abilities when they're actually on the walk. There's all sorts of different little things that can combo off each other. Then the walk itself is kind of like a different mechanic altogether. You have this track here which splits off into 2 different paths, and the idea is that you essentially get to choose between 1 to 4 spaces, move as far as you like within that limit, and you get what's pictured there. If you share a space with another opponent walker, then you have to effectively give up a reputation point to do it. I'm not entirely sure why that's the case, but that's just the thing. It means that there's a little bit of competition for spaces. It's kind of like Parks, if you've ever played that game. But essentially characters will move through this place getting different dog resources, but also being able to do little shenanigan abilities like swapping dogs with ones from their kennel in the field, swapping them around, deciding that, you know what, I can't really take care of this border collie anymore, I'm going to swap it out for a Basset, Griffin, Vendine. I have no idea what that dog breed is, but oh well, go for it. And the idea is that this is kind of where you're acquiring more stuff. But there's an incentive to get out of the park early, because doing so will enable you to score some extra victory points and avoid losing the victory point if you're out there last. There's a timer aspect to it as well, because as soon as everybody else has gone out of the park, if you're the last one left, instantly you're catapulted out of the park, the place shuts, and you don't get to continue any further. So there's a sort of balancing act to do between gaining the resources that you want, but also actually getting out of the park on time. And then after that, everybody comes home and you basically, get points for which ones you've walked. You'll lose points for dogs that have got restless and haven't walked. I mean, why would you not want to walk your dog, you monster? But after that, then the game rinse and repeats for another 3 rounds. You have different, forecast abilities that essentially augment the round to say, oh, this special effect is in force. The locations here are boosted with these location cards that come out each round that add different, abilities and resources to spaces to make them a little bit more lucrative. But that's essentially the game. You rinse and repeat that sequence of acquire the dogs, select who's to walk, do the little walk, and then come home and score some victory points before you rinse repeat another 3 times. And then after you've scored a few endgame points for, different final scoring abilities on your dogs, or the majorities for these breed experts, then count up the most reputation points, and of course, the most is the winner.
Of course!
If you're going to make a game about dogs, something as cute and lovely as dogs, you gotta make it look the part. You can't make it look abstract or, really dry or anything. Well, nothing about this game, from a looks perspective, I can fault. This game looks gorgeous.
Ooh, you good looking. You're hot.
This has a beautiful board with a nice park scenery on the back of it, but it's also kind of got that mix between color and, light purple, mauve and white. It's like a Stark thing where you've got the really bright background and then color on the front. I love that combination. Much like the cover where you've got this beautiful picture of the dog, wanting to walk, and these dogs in the background on a white border. I love that kind of combination. But it's repeated around the rest of the box as well. You've got all sorts of different dog breeds on there. Everything in here just looks beautiful. The card artwork, stunning. You've got the back of the cards that already look fantastic with, again, a replication of that. But all these different dogs that are in here, all these different dogs that are all unique. The abilities aren't unique, we'll get onto that later, but every single dog that you get in this game is a unique dog. They'll come in the different breeds, so you'll get some terriers, some pastoral, some hounds, some gun dogs. I don't know where all these terms come from. A pastoral dog, a gun dog, a toy dog. Don't ask me, I'm not a dog expert, but clearly, there's effort that's gone into the theme here, and I have a lot to learn about dogs apparently. But everything in here, right down to what you get in the box component-wise. You get 2 of these trays, and they've got lids. They're from game trays, I believe, and they're great. I mean, they're shaped like dog bones, which is just a nice little twist. You got little cardboard tokens for the collars, and little wooden components for everything else that sit nicely in these 2 trays so that everybody on the table can reach for what they need. It's all just really nice. Now, looks-wise, can't fault. It's beautiful, fantastic. The artists here deserve credit, all right? All the artists. I mean, Holly Exley, Dan May, and Kate Avery. They deserve a lot of credit here. But functionality does sometimes get a little bit lost tracked here, mainly with regards to 2 aspects. Firstly, the dials.
It's a cookie!
No, it is not a cookie!
These dials where you bid for the blind bid for victory points are very loose. It is very easy to knock these things, and you'll have to basically go, right, I'm going to set myself to 3 points I'm going to bid, and then you're supposed to put it down. I guarantee multiple times when you pick up that dial, you're going to accidentally do that, where you accidentally move it in your fingers without realizing because it's not sturdy enough to stay in place. Compare it to something like the dials out of Scythe, the big Stonemaier game, where you had those ones for power. Those ones were quite sturdy. If you put it in a certain number, it wasn't going to suddenly shift. Here, these things are a little bit too loose, and there's no way that I can see to tighten them up. a small annoyance, but it does crop up more often than I would like. The other slight problem is the insert. The insert is not terrible. I mean, it holds everything in place. You will have spaces for the cards, it will hold your tokens, the score pad, all the different dogs, including the expansion, the mini expansion dogs, mind. We'll get onto the proper expansion another time. But the problem with this insert is that as soon as you put it on its side, stuff falls out. Yeah, the insert is not good enough to keep this box on its side, and so it needs to be stored horizontal like that. And if that's going to put you off, then, you know, bear that in mind. But yeah, as much as the insert is nice from a, like, you know, visual and holding perspective, for some reason game trays just seem unable to make anything store vertical. I don't know what it is with them, but you know, those little minor blemishes aside, the aesthetics are really nice. And those aesthetics help to make the theme palatable. This is definitely a relatable theme. Anybody who's a dog lover or a dog owner is going to recognize a bunch of these breeds, is going to understand all the stuff about walking dogs and, you know, the effort that goes into it. But it's just, you know, unless you pathologically hate dogs, this is going to be something that everybody will just get sucked into. Yeah, it's abstracted to a point, but it's still immersive in the fact that because you're looking at all this gorgeous artwork of dogs, as long as you don't hate dogs, you're going to get sucked into it and you're going to enjoy just kind of playing something nice, light and fluffy. Like, it really is a fluffy game. You don't need to take it too seriously, and certainly that's probably going to benefit you. We'll get onto a couple of reasons why later. But, you know, all in all, it's just nice and fluffy.
It's so fluffy!
Now, the game is certainly light, and people would normally say that it is too light. I'm not sure about the too light part. This is definitely light. If you are a gamer, you're going to understand every rule that's in this book fine, and you'll be able to get to grips with it and play it, and it won't take you too long. Relatively light gamers will also be able to get into this. They'll understand the mechanics of moving across the park pretty easily, and then the dog abilities are not particularly complicated. I mean, what we've got, you know, gain 2 points for each working dog in your kennel. When walking this dog, whenever you scout, you may immediately swap. They're two of the shenanigan abilities. Social butterfly. When walking this dog, if you land on an occupied location, do not pay a rep to gain a reward. I mean, these are very straightforward abilities, but do not kid yourself, this is not a gateway game. I have seen people who have, like, never played games pretty much before trip up with this. They'll get into it and they'll enjoy it, but trust me, I have taught non-gamers this game and they trip up with the ability combos. And this is kind of a golden rule I have. You cannot call something a gateway game if you have multiple unique card abilities that combo with each other. That level of gaming is a step up above what I would expect somebody to, you know, to deal with. I mean, you play something like Sushi Go or Ticket to Ride, you know, there are very few mechanics in it and very few moving parts that interlink together. I mean, I don't need to know that, you know, when I get in Sushi Go, a dumpling, that it will combo with the sushi roll, which then combos with this and will combo with, if another player gets this. It's like, it doesn't go through multiple steps. But here you do have a lot of different dogs that can combo. You've got the ability to swap them in and out. You've got the field itself, which will, you know, be a case of, well, what do I do for next round? Yes, the stuff is simple. But I'm not going to call this gateway. Non-gamers have tripped up, and certainly I'm not going to put it in a gateway category.
Dear God, what is it like in your funny little brains? It must be so boring.
Time on the box is 40 to 80 minutes, and that's a pretty accurate time frame, actually. This isn't one that you're going to play in 20 minutes and be done with it. There's too much going on. But even at 4 players, this game should not take you very long. I mean, unless you've got somebody who is really AP, and I mean, I know that's an excuse you can say with any game, but there's not a huge amount of AP on with this. You know, you've got 4 spaces to pick from for your location reward, and they basically get you different resources for the most part. What's there to really, you know, go mad thinking about? The card abilities, as I said, are not stupidly complicated. You don't have to think long and hard about how you're going to make it work for the round. So the rounds do progress fairly quickly once everybody's got the rules down, and 40 to 80 minutes is a reasonable time frame, and I think kind of suitable for a game like this. I wouldn't want this to take more than an hour and a half. It's too light for that. There is a decent amount of variety in here for the base game, at least. Bear in mind that I've got to review this without considering the expansion in mind. These dog abilities do repeat themselves. You are going to see the go fetch ability on multiple dogs. You're going to see the eager ability on multiple dogs. But all of these dogs are unique and they come in different breeds. And certainly they have some variation here and there. So there's enough variety to make the game interesting while you play it, but don't think that this is going to suddenly be like, oh yeah, every game feels very different. Although when you do get the big deck of dogs at the start of the game, you effectively split it in half and only use half of the deck in order to play a game. So there's a lot of dogs that you won't see, and also you're not guaranteed to have all the different breeds represented in equal measure. Yeah, it's one thing to say that there's 12% of the deck is terriers and 17% is gun dogs, but you know, you might end up with cutting half the deck and suddenly you barely got any gun dogs in there. It can happen. You won't know it's a thing, and that can be a negative for some in terms of the luck aspect. But again, light and fluffy game, we can kind of forgive it for stuff like that. But there's enough in here to keep you entertained and, you know, to keep people interested to come back for more games. But no, this isn't going to be like a completely different affair every time. And of course, the best thing about this game is the card abilities themselves. You know, the bidding is fine, although it does have issues. We'll get onto that later. Walking through the park is kind of basic, but there is a bit of competition for spaces, and obviously there's the time aspect with other players, so you're not entirely playing a multiplayer solitaire game here. But really, it's what you can do with these dogs that makes it fun. You know, you look at a dog on the field and you think, well, I could grab myself a utility dog, you know, this German Spitz here, for, you know, the breed, you know, because utility dogs are highly valued at the end, but then I like the go fetch ability, and this one, you know, when I walk it, if I gain a stick, I also get a ball. Well, I can use that ball to afford these dogs later, or maybe I need the ball in order to do with this dog that says if I stack balls on it at the end of the game, it will get me more points. These abilities, as I say, are not stupidly complicated, but it's fun to try and combo the best kind of little mini engine, in a sense, with these dogs in order to score the most points by the end, or to give yourself kind of like a resource engine. Like, I'm really good at obtaining toys. I'm not too good at obtaining treats. I might need to use the park in order to get treats, but as long as I take this particular dog on the walk, I will always be able to get a good source of toys. There's stuff like that you can do, and it's just a nice bit of light fun. Now, I mentioned in the overview that this kind of feels like a mixture of different mechanics, and that's good and bad. The mechanics themselves don't necessarily gel with each other to say, oh yeah, this one flows nicely into this one, flows nicely into this. They are essentially like playing 2 to 3 mini games as you go through. But one or two aspects of the mechanics and the point scoring do cause a little bit of concern. First up is these breed experts. Now, I like the idea that you've got some majority scoring at the end. I mean, that's all well and good. But the problem with this is that you only acquire 8 dogs by the end of the game, which means that you might end up winning one of these like majorities by 1 dog. And literally, you might be the only person with one of those dogs in the entire group. So you get 6 points for pretty much just having 1 dog. And maybe it was because another of that breed just never turned up, or because other people went and bought other things, that it kind of just ends up being like, oh, that was a bit of a lucky fluke. But then also, ties are friendly. So, you know, if you only have 8 dogs, most of the time people are winning these breed awards with 2 of a particular breed. Sometimes they might get one of the dog pack abilities and they might focus on a single breed, but, you know, that's good and bad in terms of points. But usually they'll have 1 or 2 of the various breeds, and so there's a lot of ties that happen, and everybody just gets surprised at that point. These kind of needed to have a little bit more impact in terms of like players being able to really win these outright, or to dominate a particular like group of breed experts. But so it just kind of sometimes feels that you get some of these points at random. Like, there's not enough spread of how many dogs you can get for these majorities. The other aspect that's lacking a bit is this blind bidding aspect with the acquiring of the dogs. The problem it has is that you can bid anywhere between 1 to 5 of your victory points effectively to get a dog. I've yet to see a single player in any game bid above 3. There's no reason to. Nobody is willing to give up that many points. I mean, when you finish this game, you are effectively, you're going to loot the board if you've done well enough, but you're still only going to finish with somewhere between, say, 50 to 60 points, 70 if you've done really well, I guess, in that region, but you're not going to finish with a ton of points. Giving up 5 is quite significant, and most of the time you'll end up giving up 5 and then everybody else has only spent 1 or 2. If you are by yourself on a particular like dog, like I don't think anybody else is going to outbid me there, you're only going to bid 1, and chances are if you've gone there first, because you break the tie by going there first, somebody has to bid 2 in order to go after you and outbid you, which could happen, but nobody has really any incentive to bid above 3. If you really want a dog, like I pathologically want a dog for my particular combo, it had better be damn good to want to give up 3 points for it. And as I say, most of the time 3 is enough, especially if you've gone to try and acquire the dog first. You've got 3 points and a tiebreaker. Most people aren't willing to spend 4 or 5 in order to outbid you on it. So it just, I don't know, the blind bidding works in that you are spending points, but because most people are only spending 1, 2 or 3, the differential between the players for spending the points isn't quite as big an impact. Compare it to something like 5 Tribes, where you bid victory points for turn order in that. You can spend next to no victory points at all in there, but you could spend a job lot in 5 Tribes. But then honestly, does anybody in 5 Tribes spend the 2 higher amounts on that track? Because the points fluctuate rapidly. Whoever bids the highest amount on there? Same problem with this. Now, as much as the game is light, and I certainly have to give props that it is light, the rulebook is not the best. The rulebook is adequate to play the game, but you may have to read a couple of the FAQs in the back, and in my case, you may even have to go on Board Game Geek to look up a couple of rules that don't quite make sense. Yeah, the layout is not too bad, and there's not a huge amount of text to write, but I would have liked to have seen maybe more examples of some of these abilities and effects, because there really aren't that many examples in here. But also, some pages are just basically a wall of text, which is never great to see in a rulebook. But even then, I found that there were occasions where there were certain rules omitted or just phrased rather badly, with, you know, certain bits that were kind of like teaching your grandmother to suck eggs, given like an emphasis, and then very key bits left out. It's not a terrible rulebook, but when you start seeing stuff in the FAQ at the end, which you think, that's a pretty major thing you should have maybe covered in the main rulebook.
By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
I feel that maybe that this is something that kind of deserves a 2.0 rewrite of this, or maybe just needed a couple of extra people to proofread this rulebook, because it's not, I say, not terrible. You'll still be able to play the game, but I've seen a lot better, and it's, you know, when you've got a light game, you're going to have people playing who aren't used to games. They're not going to have this back knowledge of, oh yeah, that mechanic means this, it's just like this, it probably means this. You know, they won't have that. They will read the book, take it literal as gospel, and then try to play it, and then have occasionals where they're like, hang on, does that work? Hang on, let me just check the book again. And you don't want to be checking a rule book when you're playing a light, fluffy game. It's, you know, it's understandable to read a rulebook and check it when you're playing a 3-hour big Euro monstrosity, but something as light as walking dogs, you want it to be super smooth and super clean. And as I say, it's still smooth and clean, but it could have been better.
Overall, I would rate it a C+. Okay? Not great.
The game caters for 1 to 4 players, although if you play this with 1 or 2, you have to use an auto dog walker mechanic. Now for 2 players, it actually works fairly well. You've only got to keep track of one of them. It doesn't do a lot. It mainly just like takes up spaces on the location track and, you know, tries to outbid you on certain dogs. So it just gets in the way, which is kind of what every other player is trying to do in a multiplayer game. But the solo mode effectively has you using 2 of these, and then it's just beat your own score. But you know, you lose that aspect of like trying to suss out whether a player really wants a particular dog or not, because you can kind of game out the system. With the solo mode, they are specific in how they go after certain things. Like when it comes to the dogs, they're always going to go after the dogs with the highest value on the breed expert. But multiplayer games won't have you always bidding for dogs that are highest on the breed expert. There's more to it than that. And the solo mode just can't quite replicate it. But it's not that it's a bad solo mode. It's nice, you can learn the rules of the game nicely by playing it, and it is very smooth. But it's not something I would generally maybe pull out myself to play solo. I feel like if I hang on to this, this is more for playing with light gamers, like I just want a nice little break from heavy Euro mechanics and I want something light and fluffy, but I can't see myself necessarily bringing this out too often to play solo, but now and again I might do. So Dog Park is trying to take a very unique theme in this industry. You know, I mean, there are games about dogs, but not about walking them, and trying to make a nice, accessible, light, fluffy game to a majority of people. Now, it is very light, but it's not gateway level, but it is still a bit too light for some of the heavier gamers. So it is playing to a particular niche group in the market, But, you know, I kind of wish it was gateway level. I wish it had just gone that little bit simpler just to make it that way. But it is very difficult to make anything about card ability a gateway level. I mean, you know, Wingspan is not a gateway game for that extent, and nor is Seven Wonders for that same reason. You know, multiple different card abilities is a step up in complexity. So hopefully there's enough people that are interested in this who are not gateway gamers, not heavy gamers. But the theme is done splendidly well here. The aesthetics are absolutely beautiful. A couple of blemishes with the looseness of these dials and, you know, the insert not going vertically. They're a pain, but they're not, you know, enough to kill the experience. The variety is decent enough for the base game, but it's certainly going to need some more content in order to make it more fresh each time. We'll get onto that possibly in the next video. But, you know, all in all, it's just a nice, light, fluffy, innocent game. A couple of little blemishes with, you know, people not willing to bid high values, making this mechanic a little bit not as impactful as I would like. And same goes for the terrier, you know, the breed expert awards. You know, I wish that maybe they had a bit more impact in how they scored. And I think maybe that's the biggest negative to take away, that, you know, this is a mishmash of different mechanics, some of which don't quite gel together as well as they should, or don't have as much impact as I hope they would. I mean, I would have loved to have seen this blind bidding mechanic be a massive decision where I'm like, oh, I don't know whether I should bid 2 or 4, I don't know, really I shouldn't. And you don't get that feeling here. And the breed expert dogs, because it's very easy to tie or win these, you don't find that there's much of a kind of like a, you know, a war going on between the players of like, oh, I must get ahead on the terriers now. It's kind of like, we're going to share it anyway, and there's no more terriers. Yeah, what the hell? And it just doesn't quite, you know, build up any of that turn angst or tension. That being said, though, the game is still really solid. I'm giving it a respectable 7 out of 10. It's a good game. I do recommend it, particularly if you are a dog fan. If you love dogs, if you own dogs and you want something cute for like family weight, and you just like gorgeous pictures of dogs, that this game could be an 8 or 9 out for you. And I can totally see why. For me, as somebody who's kind of used to playing more mid and heavier games these days, but still enjoys a nice light game for various people. I mean, you can look at my shelf. Yes, you can see heavy stuff, but if I've shown you all my shelf by shelf rate my shelf videos, you've seen me start light games before. I do like light games when they have a nice theme that works well, look good, and cater well to that, you know, particular grouping. But certainly heavy gamers might not get enough out of this, and certainly if you're a non-gamer, you might struggle to get used to the rules up front, particularly as I think the rulebook could have been a little bit clearer. But, you know, there are little blemishes here and there. Nothing in this game feels like a big flaw. It's more like a kind of, I don't want to say death by 1,000 cuts, it's just more that there's a few little pinpricks here and there that kind of get in the way of what could have been a fantastic game that I would say like is like top 10 of the lightweight category. As such, this is still a really good game, but there is an expansion out for this, as well as a few mini expansions. So the question is to ask now is this game good enough for you in the base set form, or is the expansion going to be needed? Well, you're going to have to check out my next video to find out a bit more on that one. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Check out my Patreon if you want to help support the show. Check out the recent review I did for Peacemakers, Horrors of War, if you want to see another game with cutesy animals, although I would say this one's a little bit more friendly than that one, just saying. But by all means, check out that one for more. And of course, check out the rest of the videos I've got. Lay your comments down below. Do you love this game? Are you a dog lover, a cat lover? You know, do you get enough out of this game? Do you agree with the blemishes that I mentioned, particularly the ones about the breed experts and the blind bidding? I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that. And of course, don't talk about the expansion too much. I got another video that I'll be bringing out very soon that will talk in more detail about that one. Until next time, remember, regardless if you have any idea what a Hungarian Vizsla is or a Dutch Schmushhound, clearly I need to learn a lot more about dogs. It's still only a game, so take care, bye for now, and treat your dogs with respect.